My name is James Stowe. I am an illustrator and graphic designer. I am also a part-time art instructor. And I am the West representative for the Graphic Artists Guild. And you are listening to the GuildCast.
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.
So the only requirement I have, and I'm finding that there's reasons why I have requirements for myself when I start things off with clients. The only requirement I have is that I need all the decision makers in the room when we have the kickoff, because I have a series of questions that I ask, and it's more aimed towards like, what's the tone? You know, what are adjectives that describe the brand? How do you want the brand to feel as if it was a person and stuff like that? So those are the questions I ask because I'm very like emotive designer.
It's another GuildCast bonus week, and this week we're back in the South to hear from Crisy, Terrence, and Camille on whiskey and feedback in It Came From the South.
Whiskey is not the same as bourbon. Jack Daniels is bourbon, right? Not whiskey.
That's a great question. Considering how close I live, you'd think I would know this.
And then there's a difference between a whiskey with an E and a whiskey without an E. What?
Really?
Yes. I was like, why are we doing this?
No, Jack Daniels is whiskey.
Is it? Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's Tennessee whiskey. Yeah, look at that.
That's
literally, Jack Daniels is 45 minutes north from where I live.
What?
I don't know why I'm pointing as if you guys could see where I'm pointing, and I can't even. My husband makes fun of me because whenever I'm trying to give directions, I just point in the direction I think the item is. Like, oh, the McDonald's is over there, but like my map is wrong. And so north is probably that way, but I think it's that way. So I'm really.
I've never been good at that either. Don't feel out of place. I have no idea what northwest, southeast is. So living in Miami, I was like, what? Turn what? So right and left, please. Thanks. But
it's a direction.
Whiskey. So okay, so you've never been to Jack Daniels, or have you been?
Oh yeah, we've been a bunch of times.
Cool.
It's a really cool tour. I never actually appreciated whiskey until I did the tour because I was just like, alcohol, whatever. I wasn't really like drawn to it. I think probably because my first drink ever was a tequila shot, and that was just like a very alarming experience. And
why would you do that for your first drink?
No. Somebody thought it would be funny on my 21st birthday to give me a tequila shot, and I was like, wow, that was so kind of you. Thank you.
That's not a friend.
I would have done that. I'm sorry. I would have been like, yeah, you need to go hard. What are you going to sip? I mean, you might as well get...
No, it was like licking the lime and everything. Me wearing my red Eeyore t-shirt or hoodie, taking a tequila shot on my 21st birthday. I felt so adult. It was great.
That's awesome. Well, okay, so I used to be a bartender. So
oh yeah,
this is so funny that the feedback part and whiskey. I just thought that was super genius. By the way, Terrence, I don't know if I said that to you. I was like, this is so perfect because drunk people give the most feedback, right?
Oh yeah.
Oh. I didn't think about that.
What kind of feedback would you get?
That wasn't the thought. Oh, all kinds of things. Like, people really come to bartenders and tell them their life stories. So I've heard many life stories. One time I met a pilot, which was really cool, and he actually ended up taking me for a flight, which was really cool because I'm into that. Really cool. But, yeah, right? But he was like, so he was sitting, and how that happened was he was I still remember his drink. It was like a vodka and orange juice, but he had a specific amount. Like the first time he came, he was pointing on the glass, like, this is where I want my vodka, this is where I want orange juice, I want 2 cubes of ice, I want my straw this tall, and you have to cut it, bro. I was like, oh no. So then he kept coming and doing the same thing. So I just got used to it. And then one day he just started talking. He was so quiet. And just one day he just started talking. He's like, yeah, I'm an army vet and I used to fly explosives to different countries. I was like, what? That's crazy. But yeah, just one day he got more talkative than usual. I think he had more than usual as well. Mm-hmm. So yeah, the floodgates opened.
Well, I'm curious because you could probably draw connections between being a bartender and being a creative? Because sometimes as creatives, we're approached with a very specific, I want this logo to look this way with this color. And like, they're very, prescriptive as to what they want and what they expect you to deliver. Versus other people are like, I just want something fruity. And you're like, okay, let me go, try something out. So I'm curious if as a bartender, you found that over time, you needed to ask more questions or less questions to figure out what somebody actually wanted versus what they thought they wanted?
That's a really good question. I feel like it's different for each person. I feel like some people, they just want the same thing all the time. And that for me is simple because you walk in and know what you want. And that like for me, increases your customer service because if you already know what I want, then I don't even have to ask. I just sit and then I get it and that's cool. But then there's some people that, and it depends on where you work as well. There's some people that come and they'll ask for a fruity drink, like you said, but then a lot of times, depending on the bar that you're in, people come up and they know exactly what they want. I feel like it tends to be younger people that tend to be more experimental, and then older people just kind of sit in their whole routine, and they'll come every day and order the same thing. So I feel like it's different. I feel like it's.
Do you feel?
I feel like it's different depending on the person, but similar to creativity, like the way you express it.
Okay. Yeah, I was gonna ask you, like, when you were bartending, did you feel like bartending was a creative endeavor?
You said what? Again? Sorry?
When you were bartending, did you feel that bartending was a creative endeavor?
I would say yes to a point. Like if it was a thing where it was easier to be creative when you had people that would come up and just say, hey, what's your favorite drink? Can you make me that? Sometimes people would do that. And or I want something like how Crisy was mentioning, there are people that will come up and say, hey, can I get something that's kind of sour but a little bit sweet? So automatically, but really strong, automatically off the top, I'm going to offer you a margarita. But then can I be creative if you just say a certain set of things? Yeah, I can make up a whole bunch of stuff and just make something that doesn't have a name. So I feel like, again, it just depends. Like, because if nobody comes up and says, hey, can you just make me something with these parameters? Like most people are just coming up and saying exactly what they want. And especially when it's older people, they're a lot more specific about how you make the drink. So like a Manhattan, they want to know, they have their specifics. And what else are they specific with? Oh my God, a martini. Martinis are very specific.
Yeah.
So in a situation like that, it's less creativity, obviously.
I'm curious, did you find, because I know this, well, at least this happened to me, where over time you start to pick up on things that you've seen and maybe your clients end up influencing you a little bit because they'll maybe introduce you to something you hadn't have thought of before. So did you find that you started adapting, well, I guess I have two questions. Did you start adapting your own taste to what your clients were asking for? And did you discover through the process that you had like styles or ruts that you would get into in terms of making drinks? Like you would always make some sort of sour, or you would always gravitate towards the whiskeys or something like that. Does that make sense?
That's for me or Terrence?
I haven't been a bartender yet. So,
but from the creative point of view.
Do I find myself getting into a rut? Sans sours and things. I mean, that's a hard question, right? Because there's the whole debate is, are you supposed to create something do you have a style? Or are you supposed to create whatever the client wants and try to mimic what the industry is doing? I could say I do get caught in a rut if it's under a certain amount, and if they want something quick. I know we all get stuck in ruts in terms of ingredients when we're talking about like typefaces that we all go to consistently.
Sure.
Yeah, I think I do. I do have a certain style. Luckily, it's not like, it's funny because it's not whether they're older or younger. It's usually based on like budget and experience. Yeah.
True.
I wanted to ask you a question, like, since we are talking about feedback and hard shots. Two questions, actually, for both of you. How often did people how did you take the feedback when people did not like their drinks? And then did you make it easy for people to give you feedback?
Ooh, that's a really good question, Terrence. I feel like I'm the type of person that I'm okay with feedback. I feel like it depends on how you give the feedback though. Like, I feel like if you're being rude with your feedback, I don't really have patience for that. And I shut down immediately, which might be a character flaw, but that's just how I am. Like, if you're rude, I can't really get past that. Very easily I can, but not very easily. But I feel like I'm just generally open to feedback. And if somebody didn't like, I used to be a server as well. I was a server before I was a bartender. Yeah. And I feel like being a server, you get a lot of feedback as well, with your food and what people don't like and how it should have been cooked different. So I got used to having to get feedback all day long. And it just kind of groomed me into this. It doesn't bother me at all. Like, if you have feedback, as long as you're not rude. So I feel like, yeah, if for example, you come to my bar and you want a margarita and you like to have, some people like their margarita more sour, some like it more sweet. You know what I'm saying? So I'll make a standard. And if you don't like my standard, then you can tell me how you want to change it. And I can probably make you another one. You know what I'm saying?
Curious.
But not if you drink it off, but I'll make you another one. That's just a vibe. I feel like. I'm
curious so sometimes I'll get feedback from clients and I'm like, oh, that's not going to work. Like, that's going to be really weird. Like, that's just like really bizarre. And I can imagine for someone, like when you're working with food, literally your tastes are so different that for someone, cilantro tastes like soap, but for somebody else it tastes amazing. Yeah. And I can imagine like being asked to do really random things and almost resisting because you think it's not going to work and you don't want to give them something that's going to be disgusting. But at the same time, it's like, well, it might work. And then you're either pleasantly surprised or firmly, justified in being like, that was the worst thing I've ever created. How would you guys handle situations like that where you get feedback that you in your gut think is not going to work, but, do you see it through or what do you do?
It's tough because there's so many different perspectives to that. Since we're talking about, because I was a server also, and it was very funny. The restaurants in New Orleans are pretty staunch about what they serve you because they know what's best, period.
Wow.
And so they pretty much were like, yeah, no, we're not. Well, it's weird. For the most part, they were like, yeah, no, we're not doing it. But then because New Orleans is known for service, they would try to do anything you asked. And I think professionally, the whole thing stands true. Like, you should do all that you can. But to the extent where you feel like it's about to break something or totally do something that is going to just make the client look like a total idiot, then I think you should be like, yeah, I don't think we're going to do this. So sometimes what I'll do is maybe at most explain it or sketch it out. But then for me, there's a point where if the client still is like, okay, you've explained it, I don't care, I want you to do this, then I just flip that switch off. And just go, okay, this is what they want. Let me do it. And I no longer am responsible for this design. On the other side, my 8-year-old decided that she wanted to make a cake. I don't know what it was, cake shape. And so I let her go at it. And it was like red velvet cake. And I was like, well, what do you want to put in it? Because it needs a liquid. And she was like, apple juice. And I was like, okay, let's do that. Oh, and then she put ice in it. And she was just like, it's good. And I was like, yeah. And I was about to try to stop her. But I mean, that's one of those things where it would have been my taste getting in the way of her experimenting and growing. But I mean, those are two different scenarios.
Yeah, but it's still interesting.
Similar too. Yeah, there are similarities. Like, I feel like I'm the same with my child as well. Like, I have to remind myself to let her do things. Like, like if she's drawing a C and it doesn't look like a C, I mean, a C is different, but if she's drawing like a car, she was drawing a car the other day and it looked not as great at first. And I was just like, what is that? And she said a car. And I'm like, I'm trying to go back and forth with her. Like, based on what cars usually look like, this is what it would look like. But if you say that's a car, that's a car. But on the flip side, I mean, I feel like there's still a certain line that you have to draw and be like, all right, I'm not going to allow you to put dirt in your cup, or I'm not going to allow you as a person in my restaurant or at the bar to order something that's extremely gross, unless you're prepared to pay for it. Because sometimes people ask you to do these things and it's not going to work, and they pressure it. Like for example, like how Terrence said, like if they say, all right, this is what I want, And if at the end you don't like it, like there's nothing I can do for you because you asked for exactly this and I gave it to you exactly like this. And also, but before that, I'm going to make the recommendation and say, hey, I don't think this is a great idea. Based on my own experience, I think it'd be better if you tried it like this. But if you want it your way, just understand that this is what happens next.
Yeah. I'm curious if this happens to you guys too. So, you talking about your daughter driving a car and it didn't look like what we're traditionally used to a car looking. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I know what happens to me sometimes is I'm so used to, like, my brain has been wired to quick solutions, like draw happy face, ... line, easy. Mm-hmm. I know what a happy face looks like. I don't have to think about it. But I wonder in that, we're gathering so much knowledge and quick shortcuts to solutions in order to be efficient with our time, to maximize our earnings and all that we're missing, and we're not allowing ourselves to explore and to make bad things, to learn. Because I find myself not even wanting to draw because it's not going to be perfect because I haven't used that material in so long that it's going to be terrible. And I don't even explore that option anymore. It's allowing yourself to have that exploration and allow yourself to fail, do the velvet cake with apple juice, see what it tastes like, acknowledge whether or not it worked and be like, okay, maybe next time orange juice, and letting yourself continuously fail, even though we're so trained to succeed and find the best solution as quickly as possible. So I'm curious if you guys find yourselves getting stuck in that rut of trying to be correct the first time around and not letting yourself, not be correct for a little bit.
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.
I'm going to cross that in an interesting way, but Camille, I'm gonna let you if you have something to say.
Yeah, I feel like that's something that happens to me.
Do we let ourselves fail in order to learn something new? Like, would you allow yourself to draw a car poorly just to see a car from a new perspective, sort of thing?
So I am, in my thinking of that, the closest thing that I apply to that is music, because I feel like sometimes in my experience writing for myself and writing with other people and for other people, I feel like a lot of the times people want to have this song just appear, and they forget sometimes that there's a process. So you play, if there's music, you play the music, you listen to, for me, this is my process. I listen to it and think and kind of just freestyle throughout the song a couple of times and see if there's anything that sticks and that I like the most. And then from there, I take a certain part and I say, okay, I like this melody, I'm going to put this word here and I'm going to change. So for me, I always try to give everything the patience that I give writing a song, because there's a certain level of patience of allowing the creative process to happen. And for me, that's freestyling at first, free writing. Even in writing, I try to free write it first, and then going back over a couple of times to kind of edit how everything fits and where maybe move things around and switch things around. Is the same way that I write as well. So I would say I allow the creativity to happen. But there are times where I'm like, okay, I have to remind myself, hey, allow yourself to just freestyle. Sometimes I'm like, I need to write this first line and I'm stuck on this first line, and I have to be like, wait, don't get stuck on the first line, just keep going.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I feel like both ways.
How about you, Terrence?
I try to knock it out in one shot and do the most effective thing. Yeah. And then I get caught. There's a project I'm working on now where clearly I'm not creating what I need to create. Mm-hmm. So I've got to kind of go to plan B and start doing the thing where I just try to draw whatever car I can as poorly as possible, and then explore what comes from that. I think, Crisy, we do get into the habit of not exploring like we would love to, because a lot of the clients don't provide the budget for us to explore. So a lot of the exploring I wind up doing is usually for the work I do for myself.
Yeah. And I'm curious too, I've found that I'm getting more and more drawn to abstract works, where for the longest time I loved realism. I thought realism was the pinnacle of art. I was like, those guys know how to work color, light, and all that. But I think I see abstract art now and I'm like, oh, those guys just let go, they don't give a flying duck, what anybody thinks about their work. They're just having fun, doing collage, getting messy, being imperfect. And it's you look over and you're like, those guys are doing something that I wish I could allow myself to do. And I wonder if that translates, we were talking about New Orleans with like jazz, where jazz is all about improvisation and just imperfection, but finding perfection in that imperfection and like just allowing yourself to be moved by the music versus being moved by something that was written by somebody else.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense, and that's a really good tie. I think building the structural framework for creativity is something that, I don't know, it's a very interesting parallel, because as designers, as much as it's the thing that we're supposed to be doing by writing a creative brief and staying with those confines and improvising within those, I find that we don't do as well, and we don't know how to improvise, and we feel like the structural framework equals like horrible, hellish constraints. And I really don't understand why, because there's so much freedom in what you can create. And we all should see that so clearly.
Yeah, I know sometimes if you give me a white canvas, I have no idea what to do, but I'll ask somebody like, hey, name a fruit and an adjective. And it's like happy potato. And it's like, potato's not even a fruit. Doesn't matter. Let's go with it. And then you put like a palm tree coming out of it and you're like, it's a pineapple potato. And that like having those restrictions actually help you propel you in a direction at least, versus just having a white canvas. You're like, what do I do with this? There's so many options and I want to make sure I'm headed in a direction that's worth my time, that you end up just like drawing happy faces over and over again.
Headed in a direction that's worth my time. I think the one thing I've been learning, so the one thing that I have found out is asking people from the outset, can you be comfortable with the visual solution, even if the visual solution does not look like what you imagined? Like that is one of the questions I'm asking people from the outset now.
Wow, that's a good question.
Because what I'm noticing is like sometimes we will talk very specifically about something and it still not come out like the person wants, but it still meets all the requirements. And so I'm finding that if I ask that question in the beginning, it kind of lets me know what type of client I'm dealing with. Because I've learned that in the end, the biggest thing we fear is feedback as a designer. You fear like letting go and doing everything, like throwing yourself and being wild and coming up with these great ideas. And then you present it to the client and just like, no, it sucks. This is not, I don't understand this. They don't understand how cool it is. And then you're all dejected. And then enough of those will make you like clip back your design. And that's unfortunate. So I'm trying to find ways, especially with running my business, to defeat that. Because it's going to limit our creativity. And I think that's the most horrible thing that can happen, because it's reflective in your portfolio.
Yeah.
I feel like I've experienced that in two ways. Like in the two ways I feel like you kind of went, but just recently, or not recently, I started working on another podcast. It's a Jamaican-based podcast, or a podcast based on the Jamaican culture. So in the design for the logo, I was like, I don't want to try to make this myself. I want to find somebody else to do this. I want it to be a Jamaican person, but I don't want it to look so obviously Jamaican, like how Rocket City is everywhere. I don't want it to look so obviously Jamaican that it's like, another Jamaican looking thing. And in the back end, and in the beginning of the process, from the beginning of the process of the podcast itself, I had this idea of how I imagined it looking. And then I was like, you know what? I don't want to, since I'm giving this to somebody else, I don't think I want to start with telling them what I want. I kind of just want to tell them this is a concept and then have them interpret that and then give us back that. And they did that, which was really interesting. And we just finished it a couple of days ago, the logo. But I had to say, in my mind, working with this specific person, the designer, he was very good with feedback, because it was me and another person, and everything that we had to say, he was just like, okay, understood. And I feel like I'm pretty open in terms of feedback. Like I like to hear what him as a designer, and I think I learned this from you guys. Like I have my point of view, but I want to hear you as a professional designer. What do you think about what I intent? Like what would you fix? How would you, if that was you? So I don't expect everybody to work like that, but like that's all. Like for me, I feel like it was so much easier to have. It was such an enjoyable process because the feedback was so easy, and he didn't take anything personally. Like I'm so ready to ask him to do everything, so I feel like the more open people are in general to feedback is better they'll do.
It is a huge part of branding to be able to be open to feedback.
And by the way, at the end, I forgot this important part. At the end, it did not look like what we had thought about at some point, but I found this sketch that I made from a year ago, okay, and I put them beside the final product, and it was so similar that I got chills, like, and I sent it to my friend, and he's like, "Yo, that's so crazy." Isn't that crazy? But yeah, I don't think I would have gotten there if I gave him. I don't think I would have gotten back to that point if we had originally gave him a direction, because our direction was not what he came up with. So
I wanted to ask, what did you mean by, you said you gave him a concept for them to work with?
All right, so we came up with the idea for the podcast, and the point of it is to focus on dancehall culture, and there's so many aspects of it. You know, it's me and two other people, so we kind of fleshed out the idea of the topics and the direction that we want to go in, and we pretty much just explained that to him. We just told him what we're trying to do. The end goal of it is to make it into it actually started with a live show, and we're like, yeah, the podcast is to promote the live show. So we wanted to do the podcast to build up the audience and then the live show. So we told him all of that stuff. So he took all of our information and he gave us 3 options at first. And then we kind of went from there. We picked the one that we liked and kind of went from there and just kind of tweet until the end. So we didn't say, hey, we want the design to look like this. The only thing I think I said in terms of looks was, I don't want it to look overly Jamaican and obviously Jamaican. I want it to nod to Jamaican culture in terms of the visual of it, but I want it to look international, not just red, green, and gold or black, green, and gold only, or as a focus. So that's all I said. Is that too specific? Not specific enough, or
no?
You guys usually get feedback or information.
Go ahead, Crisy.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, so the only requirement I have, and I'm finding that there's reasons why I have requirements for myself when I start things off with clients. The only requirement I have is that I need all the decision makers in the room when we have the kickoff, because I have a series of questions that I ask, and it's more aimed towards like, what's the tone? You know, what are adjectives that describe the brand? How do you want the brand to feel as if it was a person and stuff like that? So those are the questions I ask, because I'm very like emotive designer, but there's a logic to it. So I try to make sure that I can distill it down to an emotion and then reflect that back through, you know, picking red for passion or something like that. Not being too on the nose, but informed with my decisions. Yeah. And I'm going through a problem now where I had asked a client, you know, make sure all the decision makers are in the room. He's like, oh, I'm the decision maker. I was like, okay, great. So we had the kickoff with just him. And then I presented to more than just him. And those people had not been involved at all in the process. And for me, the kickoff meeting is part of like preparing these people to give feedback, because they're part of the process from beginning. And so I can hear from them what they expect. And so it went from being one person as a decision maker to 4 people as a decision maker. And I had missed out on 3 of those people's inputs. And then they were starting to give feedback, but the feedback they were giving was very guttural because they hadn't thought about it yet. They hadn't thought about what they wanted their brand to feel like, what it would look like, what it would sound like. They were just like, oh, you know, that orange is way too playful. And it's like, oh, okay, you know, why? You know, and you start to ask questions, and then you start to feel like a failure, but then you realize you were working with half the ingredients you needed. Yeah. And so it's like, oh, shoot, you know, we were making a flambé, not a creme brulee or whatever. Like, that's completely different. And so I think that it's interesting that you feel like you gave your person such an open-ended direction, when really just having the people in the room that we're going to make the decision and we're thinking about it. Like, all of you guys were thinking about it versus just coming into it cold and reacting to the logos. True. I think that's really important, is making sure that everyone's part of the process, because then they're ready to analyze the logo as a solution versus just something that's being presented to them. And so I'm just laughing at myself because it's kind of validating why I have these things that I've been freelancing for 7 years. It's like, oh, that's right. That's why I always insist for all the decision makers to be there. It's part of the psychological process, Crisy, of course. You know, there's a reason why you do these things.
And I feel like sometimes you never know. Like sometimes people that are not even designers, sometimes they just come up with good ideas anyway. And it's like, wow, a person that you probably don't think in the group is going to come up with the best part of the idea. Sometimes they're the ones that come up with the essence of the thing. I don't know how often that happens with you guys, but you know.
No, and just hearing what they think about it, because I always tell my clients, you guys live and breathe this brand. I am brand new to it. I barely know you guys. I can do as much research as I want, but you guys live it every day, and I want to tap into that and then distill that into the logo and make sure that everyone has a sense of ownership into it. And so, like, I don't care where the idea comes from, but just hearing everybody's thoughts on it, and then you get 4 perspectives on it. You know, you don't just get the one guy, you get all 4 people. That's where I find the value of it.
So how are you going to work yourself out of that one? Because I've been in situations like that too.
So I just told him, I was like, look, and I have a really good relationship with the guy, the first guy. And I was like, look, I'm going to be really honest with you. It's late. Crisy's tired. So she's just going to be really frank. This is a very different process for me. But you know what? It's good for me to be put into different situations because it's forcing me to think differently and forcing me to learn. Because at the end of the day, I'm not going to berate him because he thought he was doing things the right way. And he was telling me, no, I'm the decision maker. No, I don't want to put you in front of everybody. And he felt at the time that was right. And I'm like, I'm not going to question your process because it doesn't align with my process. I just need to adapt, and I just need to take the feedback that I got from these individuals. That was the guttural feedback, and just imagine, you know, maybe this is what the members would feel like seeing these logos for the first time. So there's some value in that. Am I personally annoyed that it's a different process and I'm having to take more time? A little bit, yeah. But at the end of the day, it was a topic that I was already kind of uncomfortable with. And so I think it's just feeding into that discomfort. But you know what we were talking about earlier, it's forcing me to draw a car in a way that I've never drawn a car before. So it's like, you know what, Crisy, if you can still keep growing as a designer, keep growing, take it and just do the best you can with it. So,
and you charge more for it, for the interruption to the process.
We'll see. I don't know. It's a really small nonprofit, and I'm the worst when it comes to pricing. We'll have to do a pricing podcast at some point in our lives.
Coming up on this episode of GuildCast.
And so it's like, just let me know, you know, and then I'll know not to check in for a couple more months. But radio silence is terrifying.
Sometimes I can't relate though. You know what? Sometimes I can't relate though, because I feel like I've gone through so many things in my life and still have not gone AWOL. And most are the people that needed me to not go AWOL. So it's unless it's like dire and I'm like, all right, give me a week. But a whole year, bro, like, I don't know. I was like,
yeah.
That's so long. But I understand, even like, I know I was thinking that's super long, and then you tell me 2019. That's 3 years. That's super long. So it's like, how do you guys deal with that? Like, if that happened, if that's happened between you parents.
Join the Graphic Artists Guild to listen to the full version of this episode at www.graphicartistsguild.org. Thanks for listening to GuildCast. Coming up in next week's episode.
Oddly enough, there are a significant number of copyright infringers who will, in fact, respond and say, oh, my goodness, I didn't realize this. You know, can we negotiate or let me immediately take it down? The internet has made it so easy for people to steal things that a lot of people, I think, don't even realize it.
Right.
There is also a really significant number, and unfortunately, it's over half of copyright infringers who actually will ignore you. They just won't bother to respond. That's the thing that's really heartbreaking about it. However, we did get the Case Act passed, and the Case Act sets up a copyright small claims tribunal.
GuildCast is a weekly podcast series based on the 3 pillars of the Graphic Artists Guild: advocacy, community, and business resources. Keep listening to learn more about the Graphic Artists Guild and visit our website at www.graphicartistsguild.org.